Hi there, this is Marty, and thank you for stopping by today as we take a look at these Caran Studio Gouache. It's funny to say that because it rhymes, right? Caran Gouache. And I can hardly say it without at least a little bit of a laugh. Well, Caran Gouache may seem like a silly rhyme, but Caran the company, they're very famous and well known for producing high quality, excellent art supplies. This particular set comes with 8 colors and they are 10 milliliter tubes, so they're just about the right size, I think. I tend to use more gouache when I paint. I put it on a little heavier than I do regular watercolor, and so it makes sense that they come in a slightly larger tube. Actually, double the size of some watercolor paints that come in. I think I've seen them as small as a 5 milliliter tube. Anyway, these Caran paints are interesting. Caran advertises them as at the amateur painter or the classroom painter, kind of a student grade paint, which is interesting because these paints really come in, well, there's the fan color line of these. It's just one set with 15 pans of paint, but they generally don't make a artist grade gouache that I know of. Maybe I missed that somewhere along the line, but basically they come out with this student grade. Now they claim not to use a plasticizer in this, and it's usually plasticizer is usually used to basically soften the dried gum arabic and help it redissolve. It's usually glycerin, I think they use in paints. But if you see here, you'll see a little runniness, like in the yellow you can see it there really well. Don't be bothered by that. Just mix it up and use it. It's fine. That just means that some of the binder has come up to the top of the tube, or maybe the pigment has settled. Just don't be afraid of that. Just mix it up and use it. If it's too juicy or whatever with that, you can just squish the tube around a little bit and actually mix the paint. I prefer to mix it on the palette, but you can do it whatever way you want. Now you see, gouache goes on a lot more flat than watercolor, a lot more opaque than watercolor. So you have to be prepared for that when you paint with it. But it's got, gouache has tons of utility, very excellent uses in painting. And I'll talk about that as well in a little bit here. Now, gouache is in the watercolor family of paints and has been around for like, I don't know, 600 years or so. But in America, it's probably best known as sign painters paint or illustrators paint. You see that flat chalkiness it dries to? If you ever notice a store sign, where it says 25 cents for a banana or whatever, in the olden days, they'd paint with gouache. They'd paint those signs. Sign painters would use gouache because it doesn't reflect the sun. It's a flat, it'll absorb light. Illustrators use it because it can give you kind of an oil painting effect. So you can do a watercolor study, and then here's some flesh tones, by the way. You do a watercolor study, and then you can use this paint to get closer to oil paints, and then finally maybe execute your oil painting. But if you look at this paint, you can see what I'm talking about, how flat it is. And I'll demonstrate that here in a second as we go over some lines. But the utility of this paint is pretty well known. It's pretty cool. If you hadn't tried using gouache before, you probably should. Now what I want to do is I want to compare the gouache here to regular watercolor, so transparent watercolor. And today I'm going to swatch these out on this 100% cotton mold-made watercolor paper made in a little mill in Canada. It's an independent paper mill. It's very cool. I'll put a link down in the description to them. You can check out their products, their papers. They're really well made. I get this paper at Wet Paint, my art store. So here you can see I'm just putting on the gouache, nice and easy, and it's going to dry very flat. Now I'm going to put an equivalent color, or pretty close to the same color, in watercolor side by side, and see if you can tell the difference. Please don't send me hate comments because purple is not close to violet. Yes, I know that. I know they're not the same color. I said I'd get close, though. I may not have all the correct colors, and different manufacturers use different colors, different names for the same color, or different colors with the same name, oddly enough. But here's a violet next to what's known as a purple, and here's a nice, it's kind of a dark ochre, and a nice, very nice red. These are all watercolors, so they should be, and they're transparent watercolors, so they should be mostly transparent, and we'll see here in the line test in a minute. But the idea is that you get a sense of kind of the difference between the chalky flatness of a gouache compared to the transparency of a watercolor. Top is gouache, bottom is watercolor. I tried to line them up there close. Now I'll do three lines here. One line will be a colored red pencil line. Second line is a black ink line. That's a Staedtler pigment liner. And then this is a HB, kind of a hard lead, light graphite line. So 4 different gouache colors here, the red, the yellow, the green, and that ultramarine. And I'll drag that down over the line, painting here. So my intention isn't to try to cover up the line. It's just to use the paint as I normally would. Not, like I said, poster makers, illustrators, they love gouache paint. If you go back and look at some of the illustrators of the pulp magazines of the 40s and 50s, you'll notice that a lot of the paintings they do, certainly preliminary paintings and maybe even some finished work, are done with gouache. So I've got the red, the green, and the yellow down. I just had to add a little bit more ultramarine here. You can see that's going down pretty dark, and it'll look pretty chalky. It's hard to catch that flatness and that chalkiness just in the camera light here, but yeah, you can see it's got this kind of, the more it dries, the chalkier and opaque and sort of flat it becomes. So what I need to do is I need to lay down some watercolors next to these, and hopefully these are, they're supposed to be transparent watercolors. I use them as transparent watercolors, but we'll see. So there's a little yellow watercolor there, the green and the ultramarine. And unfortunately, it's not going to be that easy to tell when they're still wet like this. I'll have to come back at the end of the video and show you what they look like dry, but at this point, it's hard to tell the difference. A little bit, you can tell they're opaque, but, well, here I'm going to pull out an old sketchbook from my days at the Art Academy, learning from the painter Jim Robinson at his school in St. Paul, and it's really nice to use this tone sketchbook because any kind of lighter color on a tone sketchbook really pops and adds some drama and effect to it. Now, I mixed a flesh tone here, so I really like the effects you can get with oil, not with oil paint, but with gouache, that it kind of looks like oil paints. I mean, to me, that's kind of a cool effect, and you can get that a little bit with acrylic, but it's not, well, and now they make a gouache acrylic, so you can get sort of that flatness in an acrylic paint, and you can rework that a little bit more. I guess I haven't used a lot of it. I used the Holbein acrylic gouache once, and it's pretty cool. But here you can see I'm just going to go in and lay in some highlights here. This model's name was Stacy, and I probably sketched and painted her well over a dozen times during my years at the Art Academy. But for the life of me, I don't have the lighting here, so I can't remember all the highlights on her face, but I've given it a try. And here is Stacy when she dressed up in a Japanese kimono. So it was interesting to paint her, and she had some pretty high contrast or nice makeup on as well. So I'll go in here and work this painting a little bit and with the gouache and let you enjoy some music. Well, I think that's right where I'll leave it. I didn't mean for the background to come out like a shadow of her face. You see where the nose and the eyebrow is? I don't know how it came out that way, but I didn't mean to do that. Anyway, here is a close-up look of the paints once they're dried. You compare these against a transparent watercolor, and you can see how much flatter a gouache paint is. Although between these two violets, they're pretty heavy. I mean, you're going to get a lot of coverage with some very good pigmented paints. But I filmed this in 4K, but I don't think YouTube really, you can get much better than 1080p on YouTube. But someday, if they upgrade to 4K or that the bandwidth is there, hopefully this video will hold up. Anyway, I film in the highest quality setting I can, and you can sort of, in that way, make out the chalkiness here, or the different texture of the paint and the transparency. You can see under the darker colors in the gouache, and even in the watercolors, it tends to obscure the pencil line pretty well. So, I mean, I think it's good. And you can imagine if you put a few more coats of paint on, it'd probably be pretty good. You'll be able to find a link to all the gear I use down in the description of this video. So go down there, and I've got some affiliate links down there. So if you buy stuff by clicking on the affiliate link, I get a few pennies, here and there. So that's always appreciated. And I hope you'll support other channels in that way. But yeah, you can see in the blue and the green, I'm getting pretty good coverage. With another coat, that stuff you wouldn't be able to see the lines too well. I liked this paint. It's studio grade, but it seems just as good as most other gouache I use. And maybe I should be more of a gouache snob. I'm not. But if you stop over at my website, owingsart.com, scroll down on the page on the right-hand side, click that little blue follow button. You can follow along on the artistic journey. I post sketchbook pages a lot there, or drawings that I do, paintings. But mostly it's just a place to have some musings about life and share some of my artwork. So if you're interested in any of that, please give it a try. Stop by, and I'd appreciate seeing you over there. Yeah, and I've been trying to get out and do a little painting lately. Obviously, social distancing. But here's a little page from my sketchbook I did recently. Well, thanks for stopping by. So long, everybody. This has been Marty for owingsart.com.